This episode is brought to you by Essentia. A better you starts with better hydration. Essentia is on a mission to inspire people to do what matters most. Their proprietary ionization process transforms water from any source into ionized alkaline water, providing water that's 99.9% pure with a pH of 9.5 or higher. Essentia overachieving H2O, the #1 ionized alkaline water. Shop now.
Have you ever spotted McDonald's hot, crispy fries right as they're being scooped into the carton? And time just stands still. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. I almost had to glance at the script there, Kieran, just to double check what my name was. As usual, you'd think after 506 episodes or whatever it is, I'd take that for granted, wouldn't I? How are you? Even I would accept it's a lovely morning today, Kieran.
It is a lovely morning. I've had a couple of extra responsibilities. One was the Baroness managed to lose one of the pipes in the kitchen, so that was flooded. I had to do my emergency Robin Asquith impersonation and get wrenches and PTFE tape and God knows what else. But I think we're still surviving. But the more important issue is that my granddaughters are going away for a week. And I've been put in charge of the caterpillars.
Oh.
So I have to report back practically every day. So we've got 4 of them have become chrysalids, chrysali. I'm not sure the plural of chrysalis. Hopefully by the time they come back, we might be in the land of butterflies.
Well, that would be lovely, unless of course they got really attached to the caterpillars and they get really upset. And they think Grandad's replacing caterpillars with something else completely. Something from Prince Charles's new portrait. For those of our younger viewers, Robin Asquith starred in a series of 1970s soft porn escapades, I think you could call them, one of which I believe was called Adventures of a Plumber's Mate.
I believe so.
And I was a plumber's mate for about a year, and I had some adventures.
Oh, were you?
I had some adventures, but none of them of that nature. Yeah, most of my job as a plumber's mate consisted of me looking innocent, telling old people that lead pipe was illegal now and they all had to come out and be replaced, because in those days lead pipe was worth a fortune.
I can imagine.
Don't waste it on Cluedo. Don't waste it. It's Questions Day, Kieran. We're recording this on Sunday, just so our listeners know where we are in case there's some big news tomorrow. But there is some big political news that we need to talk about, Kieran, before we get into our questions. And I've been looking into the big political news, Kieran. It turns out, luckily, that you and I are exempt from national service, because podcasting, it seems, is a reserved occupation. So plus also we're several decades too old. But the calling of the general election, as anybody could have told if they'd seen Tracy Crouch's face on Wednesday evening, it seemed to come as a surprise to her, and it wasn't a pleasant one for her because it has implications for the Independent Regulator Bill.
That's right. Parliament has been prorogued from last Friday, and there's something called washing up as far as the parliamentary progress is concerned and the creation of new legislation. But the Football Governance Bill was not included in that. And I've got to be honest, I think the bills that were included ultimately are more important. You know, there's things like what's happened in respect of post office and so on. So I think we have to acknowledge that those do take greater importance. So that means that we've got a status of limbo. So I think Tracy was very measured in her comments, but clearly unhappy. I know the Football Supporters Association, they have been very active since the announcement. So they've been in contact with at least 100 fans-based organisations and so on to say to political parties, we're football fans, we also happen to be voters. So let's know what's happening as far as your manifesto commitments are concerned. The Premier League will be absolutely delighted with what has happened, because they quasi-promised the EFL money in September 2023 as part of their New Deal, or whatever they choose to call it. That money has failed to materialise because there's been so much internal squabbling as far as the Premier League is concerned. So where do we go forwards? Certainly the noises coming out, I think, of the Labour Party is that they are going to have the regulator as part of their manifesto, and the rules could go further. So, the Premier League might have egg on their face, sniggering away as they are at present. I would imagine the Conservative Party, given that it was ultimately driven by the former Prime Minister and Tracy Crouch with regards to the fan-led review, you would expect it to be part of their manifesto as well, because my view is that the regulator it's a vote winner until something goes wrong and the regulator can't do it, can't fix the situation, in which case it becomes a vote loser. And we're not there yet. So you can understand the frustration. I think there is a fear amongst some clubs, and I've been in contact with a few over the course of the last few days, is that they were hoping for relatively quick progress as far as the initial bill was concerned. Lots of clubs are, we know that they're running on a hand-to-mouth basis. The more jaundiced amongst them fear that the Premier League might see this as an opportunity to put forward what ultimately would be a bad deal for the EFL, but perhaps slightly better than the current deal. And the Premier League never does anything without strings being attached. We saw this with solidarity payments. At the same time, they threatened that unless there was a compliance with EPPP, solidarity payments would be taken away. So I think the fear is that the Premier League might actually decide to come up with a slightly better deal and say to the EFL, as part of the deal, you need to drop your support for the regulator and we will give you more money now. Now, some of the clubs in the EFL are so desperate for money, they might be effectively blackmailed into that situation. So that was the reaction that I had from some of our contacts in the industry. I think the EFL board are saying, hold steady, we want to see this through, but they're not the ones who are actually physically got wage bills to pay at the end of each month.
There was no signs of any opposition to the bill from the Labour Party when it was going through the constitutional process, and Keir Starmer has possibly a more genuine relationship with football than Rishi Sunak had, notwithstanding that Sky kept telling us that Rishi Sunak's dad took him by the hand when they stood behind the goal at the Dell back in the old days. You think the poor little sod can't have seen much, can he really, unless they had a really big box for him to stand on. But it's the only thing, so you imagine it would be part of the Labour Party manifesto, but the only thing is the timing and how, what sort of priority it would be. So people out listening at home might be able to tell us with some more authority, but you're probably looking at least another season of football before we get an independent regulator, at least, I would have thought.
Yes, if there is a change of government, and we don't know how the country is going to vote as yet.
We do not, you're right.
I would imagine that if there is a new party in charge, then they will have a list. You always talk about the first 100 days in charge, where you try to make your biggest mark, and to effectively roll over an old act, an old piece of legislation as far as they're concerned, might not be at the top of the list of things to do. And then the elections in July, you've got the summer recess for Parliament. Things aren't going to get started before October. And I don't think the football regulator is going to be one of the first things they're going to try to do before the end of the calendar year.
Yeah, I do have an O-level in British Constitution, but somehow it's not coming back to me, Kieran, after all this time. Let's get on to questions. And our first one comes from Paul Donovan. And Paul Donovan is a Millwall fan. I won't hold that against him. Last year, says Paul, a true Millwall legend, our owner John Berylson, passed away. He bought us in 2006, stabilised the club, and bought so many good times. My question is, how's the club been doing financially since his son James took over as chairman? Right.
We've not seen the Millwall accounts.
Right.
It's following the sad passing of John Berylson, who I know many Millwall fans, I'm from Bermondsey Way myself,
of course.
And they all speak highly of him. He put in 10 to 12 million pounds a year every year. Didn't get a financial return. I think there's some positives and some negatives. First of all, Millwall do now have a 999-year lease with regards to the new den.
Yeah.
That gives them security of tenure. It would allow the club to develop. I've still got family back there, as you would expect from somebody of a large Irish family to have. And according to my family contacts, it's a good deal for the football club. So they say that they felt that the rent deal is pretty good. So that's a positive. It would appear that under James Berylson, the family is still committed to funding the club. There has been £30 million worth of funding in the 2 years to June 2023, but then sadly his father died then. And that's been in the form of shares rather than loans, so there's no obligation to repay. As far as 23-24 is concerned, Millwall have had a few managerial changes. That's going to be expensive.
Yeah.
We've seen some of the payoffs in the Premier League. Yes, they tend to be shorter contracts and shorter financial benefits, but they're still costly as far as the club is concerned. And we've also seen very recently a change at boardroom level. Chief executive's gone, chief financial officer appears to have gone as well. So, you wonder when you change sort of the owner of the club and you change the people in charge of the board, that can sometimes knock things off. And I know that, of the reputation of, we've had Steve Cavanaugh on the show himself. Yeah. Steve is a person who is very forensic, very much a hands-on chief executive. He's from a financial accounting background. So he was quite a cautious chief executive, which, I personally think it made sense. So we don't know what's going to happen there. There's always issues when you sort of lose first of all, senior people in the boardroom, and you've had managerial change. You think about what happened at Manchester United, for example, when David Gill left and Sir Alex Ferguson effectively at the same time. In Manchester United, congratulations to them for winning the FA Cup, of course. But I think it's fair to say that their fan base has been disappointed with the decade since losing two senior people. So I think there are some positives and some let's wait and sees as well.
It's quite nice to see Erik ten Hag being bullish for a change after the game. I like his comment when he said, if it turns out that you are sacked despite winning the FA Cup, what do you do? He just went, I'll go and win trophies somewhere else. Yeah. Which I thought was a very good answer. The 999-year lease is very good news for Millwall, Kieran, because there was 3 or 4 years ago some dispute between the club and the landowners, I believe, and there was talk about possibly having to move out, which would have been a great shame because Millwall's community work is exemplary. So that is very good news. You can't really ask for much more than having almost 1,000 years of security. Fingers crossed. We still have a planet at that time, can you?
Yes, that allows the club to invest in infrastructure in the knowledge that the stadium will be gone well before the lease expires.
Yeah. Our next question, Kieran, comes from Phoebe Homer, and it's particularly relevant, pertinent, germane, topical, take your pick. Because we saw last week, Kieran, was it 36 hours after the English Premier League season finished? We saw Newcastle and Tottenham players lining up in the tunnel in Melbourne after a 24-hour flight. No doubt they were saying to each other as they walked out to the centre circle, thank God they scrapped those FA Cup replays, because otherwise we'd have been knackered, wouldn't we, this season? Phoebe Homer, it's a simple question, and I think so many people were asking it about that specific game last week, Kieran. But Phoebe says, what are the financial benefits of pre-season tours for Premier League clubs? Because I know for a fact 2 Premier League managers, one of them being Roy Hodgson, can't abide them. They would much rather spend the time with the players at home without the risk of exhaustion and fatigue and tiredness, again, take your pick, and potential injury from these constant long journeys during the summer. But obviously the financial benefits are such that the managers can do one, can't they?
Yes. Player welfare is very low down on the list. And certainly looking at the reaction from Newcastle fans, I think many of them view this as sort of the first error that's been made by the board. In general, they've been very positive as to the decision making at the club. You've seen the comments from the likes of Kieran Trippier as well to say, I'm looking forward to the Euros potentially, and as are everybody. And therefore, having a little bit of downtime between the end of the season and meeting up with the England squad or whatever the squad may be, Newcastle United and Spurs, like many Premier League clubs, are, of course, based on players from multi-countries. It does seem a very strange approach to make. And admittedly, fair play to Newcastle. They put out the kids for their second match. And I'm not sure it's actually beneficial for the kids to get stuffed 8-0. How that's going to improve their development is a separate issue. But if we look at it through the financial lens, and I go here to the accounts of Manchester United, who, let's face it, are a huge brand, global fan base. They used to say, when they had a little bit more detail in their accounts, that they could make up to £15 million a year from the pre-season tours. And that would be in terms of, because they are Manchester United, they're able to get a guaranteed fee. Because effectively it's a bit like Harlem Globetrotters when they, you and I both remember the Harlem Globetrotters when they come to Wembley once a year and they sell out Wembley Arena. One of those few bits of live TV you used to get on the BBC for different sports. Was it Alan Weeks that used to do the commentary?
Weeks, yeah.
Yeah, he was. So, and it was, very exciting stuff. So that's going to be the benefit. First of all, there will be a fee. And I would imagine that Newcastle and Spurs, because this has been marketed as Angie's homecoming, it would have been a sellout.
It was about 76,000, I think.
76. So, the clubs would be getting at least £1 million in terms of an agreed fee. Then there's the opportunity, as far as the club is concerned, to do a little bit of commercial work. So can we sign up with, an Australian mobile phone company? Can we do this, that and the other? The players are there, so the players can pop along and, gurn next to the product. You can sign off the deal. It's great from an engagement with fans point of view. And then we have to acknowledge that, the Premier League is global, but you get an extra £3.5 million for one more position higher in the Premier League. I suspect the amount of money that both sides have earned will be less than that.
Really, it's interesting. The thing is, Tottenham will have another tour to the Southeast Asia coming up, as they do annually. It's interesting, Kieran. Ange Postecoglou's comments 2 or 3 weeks ago obviously had this game in mind when he annoyed some Tottenham fans by saying that global fans were as important as local fans. So clearly that was a PR exercise in advance of going to Australia. I mean, it just beggars belief that they went so quickly after the season ended, Kieran. It can't be good for their bodies. Then they should have been properly warming down, shouldn't they, rather than getting on a plane. But, I mean, from Tottenham's point of view, I'd be interested to see how much they make from their annual trip to Southeast Asia. It makes perfect sense for them.
Yeah.
And the players and the agents can factor that in, because if they know they're joining a club that will be spending a large part of June or July in Southeast Asia, because they're sponsored by an insurance company based in Southeast Asia, they've got players who are, of course, legends in South Korea, then obviously they're going to go to that part of the world and they're not going to spend any money, are they? So virtually everything the club makes is profit there. And they will probably argue that they've got a big enough squad not to worry too much if James Maddison picks up an ankle injury that keeps him out for 4 weeks.
It is. And I know that Brighton have just announced they're doing a pre-season tour of Japan because of Mitoma Mania. And you understand why it's happening. And it also has to be remembered that 19 out of 20 clubs in the Premier League lost money last season, pre-player sales.
Yeah.
So with the TV deal flatlining, and the Premier League keep, sort of, in my view, misrepresenting the fact that this is the biggest TV deal in the history of the Premier League. It's only bigger because you've made it 4 years instead of 3.
It's not just the Premier League misrepresenting, it's Sky as well, because Sky seem determined to tell everybody they've spent more money than ever on retaining the rights to the Premier League. This episode of The Price of Football is brought to you by the AI-powered workspace Notion.
I need Notion on a day-to-day basis. I've always got 10 things to do and I've always got people shouting at me. So Notion helps me to organise myself. It turns knowledge into action. From summarising meeting notes and automatically generating action items to getting answers to any question in seconds. If you can think it, you can make it. And Notion is for everyone. Whether you're a Fortune 500 company, a freelance designer, starting a new startup, or a student juggling classes and clubs.
And if you're any of those things, you can try Notion for free when you go to notion.com/priceoffootball. That's all lowercase letters, notion.com/priceoffootball, and start turning ideas into action. That's notion.com/priceoffootball.
Nick Carter is the most popular member of the Backstreet Boys. But shocking sexual abuse allegations against Nick are laid to bear in a must-see special. Emotional interviews from Nick's accusers and intimate details of how two celebrity brothers come to blows when Aaron comes to the defense of Nick's accusers. A detailed look at the family dysfunction in one of Hollywood's most famous families. Fallen Idols, Nick and Aaron Carter, a 2-night event, premieres Monday, May 27th at 9 on ID and stream on Max. Set your DVR.
Greg Taylor has our next question, Kieran. It's one that I'm happy to ask. It's one that our listeners are fairly obsessed with, but it's one that also I haven't got a complete handle on myself, which is why I'm happy to ask, and I'm looking forward to the answer. Greg Taylor says, football kits are made by clothing manufacturers for football teams. So do the teams license their image right to the manufacturer, or is it the other way around? For instance, do West Ham pay Umbro to use the Umbro logo, or do Umbro pay West Ham to use the West Ham logo? And how much does each party make from one replica shirt sold?
Yeah, this is a great question here from Greg. It depends on the actual retro kit itself. So we have seen England kits, for example, containing the England badge from, I buy some retro England kits, when there's a tournament on quite often. Umbro make those, but they don't always use the Umbro badge. Ultimately, if they're going to use the England crest, then they have to pay the English FA for that privilege, and that will be part of an overall deal. I don't know what the position is at Palace, but I presume that you've got, within the club store, you've got some retro kits.
Yeah.
What you will see there is an absence of the Adidas or Nike or Puma or Reebok, whoever the manual Macron, whoever it was. There'll be an absence of that badge. I certainly the case with Brighton, they still sell their 1983 FA Cup kit, and it's got British Caledonian on because British Caledonian doesn't exist. So therefore there's no IP to have to deal with. But Brighton's kits were manufactured by Adidas at that period in time. Brighton's kits are now manufactured by Nike. There was no way that Nike would allow Brighton to sell in their own megastore kits with the logo of another manufacturer. So what you tend to see is the replica kits without the manufacturer's name, if the manufacturers have changed over the period of time since those kits were originally made. So that's the position. It is very much, who are the beneficiaries? It's the manufacturers, because what are you doing with any point of IP? You're selling something which you'd normally sell for £10, for £30 or £40, because it's got the logo of the beneficiary, the football club or the celebrity or the band. I went to see Gary Newman in the Roundhouse last night, and the real T-shirts from the merchandise store were 30, and they got the official logo on. And then, the lads outside, the snide ones, were going for a tenner because they're not paying any royalties to the artist.
He looks just as much like Gary Newman on the snide ones as he does on the 30 quid ones, doesn't he, really? There's no mistaking Gary Newman. I never miss an opportunity, Kieran, to go to the club shop at Sellers Park, and I'm pleased to announce it is still a shop. They haven't decided to call it a mega store or a multi-retail unit, whatever. And I always like to pop in to see whether they've sold any of the yellow and black 1990 FA Cup replay shirts. And the answer is no. I don't know why they sell them. It's beyond me, because it's why you can just say, they've sold a lot of the 74 red and blue kit, and then the yellow and black one's still there. We lost in the worst game ever, in a yellow and black striped outfit that we've never had any tradition of wearing and never worn since.
Was that the one when Lee Martin scored?
Yes.
That was a bad match. Yeah,
I believe it was his only goal as well.
Right.
So to put some more meat on the bones of Greg's, so say Castor's deal with Villa, for example. So is it how does it the same thing? Are Castor paying Villa to put the lion on the shirt, or are Villa paying Castor to put their name on the shirt?
No, Castor are paying for the privilege. Certainly in the current kits, that's the deal that you sign. And Villa are now they're transitioning from Castor to Adidas. So what Adidas will not want is anything with Castor's name, as far as the club shop is concerned. And also thinking about Greg's question, he said, how much does each party make from one replica shirt sold? That will be part of a broader agreement, because quite often the retro kits will be made by a third party manufacturer who is not allowed to have their logo on the shirt. You'll have it on the inside label on the back of the neck, but you won't be allowed to have your logo on. So it all starts to get very complicated, but the clubs tend to do quite well out of the retro shirts.
Okay. Ben Rowley has our next question, and it's an interesting take, again, on a subject that exercises the thoughts of our listeners quite a lot. Ben says, my club, Stoke City, notoriously sold their stadium to the owners. I like that word, notoriously. That's a have I got news for you word, that one. It's like legendarily, or so, which is to underline the fact that it may or may not be notorious, but it sounds even worse, doesn't it, if you go notorious. But my club, Stoke City, notoriously sold their stadium to their owners. Since then, the club's announced a £20 million redevelopment plan of the Bet365 stadium. My question is, would Stoke City benefit from a P&S perspective? Should the stadium generate more revenue from events at the stadium, whether or not they are Stoke games?
I would imagine here the answer would be yes. And part of the reason for that is that Bet365 don't need the money. Bet365 are spectacularly successful at what they do. And therefore making an extra 6 or 7 figure sum from a real estate issue, which ultimately this is how Bet365 will see the stadium, is neither here nor there as far as they're concerned. So it should be that any expansion will be part of the rental agreement. What I think is interesting is that we have seen some clubs sell the stadium to the owner and then appear to pay what looks like that's a very modest rent. But that's not the case as far as Stoke City are concerned. They're paying £4.7 million rent a year. Yeah, that works out as, that's, thick end of 200 grand a home match. Yeah. So, it's substantial. It's 50% more than West Ham are paying.
Wow.
For example.
Yeah.
Although, we've covered the West Ham story too often. You and I and everybody listening to this show are the people who are paying for that rental agreement at West Ham. But I think, again, it shows just what a poorly negotiated contract it was on behalf of the landlord. So from a P&S point of view, if Stoke have more hospitality boxes as a result of this redevelopment, if they're able to go and concerts, if they're able to hold events, oatcake of the year, for example. Anybody that's not had an oatcake is a delicacy of Stoke. They're absolutely fantastic. I used to run a potteries company which had gone into administration, and the highlight of my day was popping down to the canteen and getting oatcake with a bit of jam on. That was absolutely fantastic.
A mate of mine went to, this is how long ago it was, he went to North Staffs Poly, I remember the time, the University of Life, I believe, was a Poly at one stage. But he went to North Staffs Poly and went up. I had a gig in Stoke the night before, and I went out drinking with him. The next morning, he said, you got to try these oatcakes. And I went, yeah, great, of course. And we walked down there. I couldn't see a shop for the life of me. And he just tapped on someone's window. And the window opened, and he put some money through the window, and some oatcakes came out of the other side. Oh, my God, they were good. They were fantastic. Now, Kieran, for our next question, I need you to do something for me. I need you to... I see you're wearing a short-sleeve shirt, a very a la Paul Weller. You're looking particularly Paul Weller this morning, Kieran, I have to say. I need you to hold out your arm, Kieran, and expose your wrist so you can be lightly tapped on it.
All right.
Because you're being chastised in this next question, Kieran.
Oh.
And it comes from Lars Grimm, and which is a great name.
Yes.
And Lars Grimm says, Kieran often speaks dismissively about American owners. You do, Kieran. You do. Kieran often speaks dismissively about American owners and their collective belief that they can revolutionise football from a financial standpoint. However, there are two glaring examples to the contrary. First, a Glazers' leveraged takeover allowed them to extract millions in dividends and profits from Manchester United over the years, despite relatively poor on-field success. Second, Chelsea's new owners figured out a loophole with 8-year contracts that allowed them to exploit amortization rules, prompting a FIFA-wide policy change. While both these things might be bad for the game, aren't they proving the point that Americans can bring new financial ideas to the table? So isn't the solution to football's finance problem just to recruit more American owners, but find the ones with good intentions? So it's an interesting way of coming to the conclusion that Americans might be good for the game. So just find the ones that aren't evil, basically, seems to be Lars's point.
Yes. Well, thank you for the question, Lars. I'm not dismissive with regards to American owners. It's just that they love money more than they love sport, and therefore that's their focus. And I don't actually have an issue with that, except I think our view is that we love sport more than we love money when it comes to football. With regards to good intentions, this would involve, and this would be a perfect solution, as we've said, with regards to the owners and directors session. We could streamline it. Are you a wrong un? That would be my one question. With Uncle Terry looking over my shoulder slightly menacingly. That would save the Premier League an awful lot of work with 777. And there's no way that Josh Wander would look at my Uncle Terry and be able to say, "Oh yeah, mate, I'm upset."
Yeah.
So having new ideas is great. I think I don't think we should be Luddite in our approach to the development of the game. And we have seen, you and I both, the changes to the rules in terms of not being able to pass back to goalkeepers. That's great. So they couldn't hold the ball. Arsene Wenger is proposing, and I think this is a fantastic idea, change to the offside rule so that there has to be daylight between attacker and defender. Yeah, that's great. It give more an advantage to the attacking teams. It might go some way to assist with VAR. We'll have to wait and see with regards to that. It's certainly some of the American investors I've spoken to, and I'm now sort of in this strange world where I'm sort of sitting on panels every week. So, last week I did one with our good friend Nick DeMarco for Law in Sport. This week it's Soccer X in Amsterdam, and I've done one in Egypt as well. So it's great fun. And you do get an opportunity to listen to ideas through different lenses. But one of the things I very much note when I'm talking to some of the American potential investors is they say, "You're rubbish at TV deals." And I go, "Well, Premier League's got the best TV deal in the world." And they go, no, it's still rubbish compared to what we get in terms of the NBA and the NFL. And then you say, well, okay, well, why is that the case? And the first question, football's a really dumb sport.
Yeah.
You go 45 minutes without adverts. We don't do that in the NFL. We don't do that in the NBA. Yeah. We don't do that in the NHL. So therefore, what you need to do is, and this has been suggested seriously, this is change football from 2 halves to 4 quarters, because that way you've got 3 15-minute advert breaks. And that means that all of a sudden the commercial value, as far as the broadcast, because they'll be able to sell more advertising space. So, American owners will have different ideas. And then, and my first reaction as a traditional football fan is, how can you possibly even countenance such a thing? And then you think, well, actually, how bad a deal is it? It's going to, okay, your Saturday afternoon experience is now going to be, an extra half hour longer. But if we're honest, Saturday 3 p.m. matches are in the minority these days. So they have different ideas. They want to change the balance between players and owners. They feel that billionaires are getting a bad deal out of football, and these horrible working class footballers from all of the world are exploiting them, and they want to reverse. I'm not. I'm on the side of the players here, and they certainly have ideas with issues such as what they refer to as dynamic pricing, and we've just seen over the course of the last 2 or 3 days, Inter Miami have been playing in Vancouver Whitecaps, record crowd for the Whitecaps, but there's a bit of an issue. And the tickets were being sold for up to $500 because effectively it's a bit like an EasyJet approach to ticket pricing. If there's a surge in demand, then the price goes up. And the Vancouver Whitecaps fans, this is an opportunity to see Lionel Messi. Messi didn't travel for the game, whether he was injured or, with similar issues when Inter Miami played in Hong Kong, and the fans feel disappointed. Now, my view as a legacy fan is I go to watch Brighton Hove Albion, you go to watch Crystal Palace. I don't go to watch I'm hoping that player X will be playing, but if they don't play, it doesn't stop my affection for the club. And I think these are the types of things, and this is the direction of travel that football is going to go. And that is very much being driven by the American owners with private equity who see football not as a sport, but as an extension of the entertainment industry. And how can we leverage on that?
So I'm going to slap you on the wrist now, Kieran, for even countenancing the idea that football could not be a game of two halves. The Arsene Wenger daylight idea, I think, has some merit. I mean, absolutely. Except, of course, we can't at the moment define what clear and obvious means. So all Arsene Wenger's plan will into is Paul Merson and Tim Sherwood arguing about what daylight means before they mangle some foreign players' names. Our next question, Kieran, comes from Deputy Chief Inspector John Davis. And Deputy Chief Inspector John Davis asked this question, Kieran. Where were you on the night of the 17th of April 2000? Sorry, DCI, John, I couldn't resist. It does seem as though we often ponder, Kieran, on how you jump the queue on Producer Guy's list. And it seems that being a senior police officer is one way of doing it, basically, because this is quite a topical question. And Deputy Chief Inspector John Davis says Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund, PIF, is buying stars from top leagues around Europe and buying clubs in equal measure. What's stopping PIF from buying Mbappe, Kane and Ronaldo and then loaning them to Newcastle or any other club in Europe they have a financial interest in for nothing? Surely the loaning club from Saudi Arabia could continue to pay the wages to allow Newcastle or others to conform to FFP.
Yes, I do like our listenership who see rules and principles as something to swerve rather than, I understand the reason why that's been introduced, which is absolutely fantastic.
A senior policeman as well, Kieran. You'd expect better from a senior policeman, wouldn't you?
Well, somebody claiming to be a senior policeman, Producer Guy might have said, "Oh, blimey, this looks like something." Has Producer Guy done his due diligence? Could it be?
Well, we're only taking Producer Guy's word for it that he's a producer, Kieran.
Well, that's true. That is true.
Yeah, I think we need to take on trust, Kieran, that our listeners are what they are.
The opportunity for clubs to use the MCO has been exploited. I've often given the Aaron Moy example where Manchester City bought him, sold him to Huddersfield, never been seen in a Manchester City shirt. We've got our very good friends at Watford and Udinese with the Kamara deal?
Yeah.
Very similar. So therefore, in principle, there is nothing to stop Newcastle United's owners doing something of a similar nature. What I would say there is we saw the Premier League chief executives meeting, which was very soon after Newcastle United being acquired by PIF, and they introduced the associated stroke related party deal, in which all deals of more than £1 million have to be assessed for fair value. Right. So in the case of Chelsea transferring the hotels to themselves and making a 76 million profit, Chelsea have to be able to prove that 76 million profit is a valid number. Now, I don't know whether that is. I'm not a surveyor. You don't know. It seems to have taken an awfully long time. We've seen Chelsea, by all accounts, do similar transactions recently as well. Players fall within that remit. So the view would be is that if PIF do sign Mbappe for Al Hilal, and the same with Harry Kane, Cristiano Ronaldo is already there, and they sign them at market rate, so Mbappe it would be 200 million, Kane 100 million, Ronaldo 100 million, whatever it's going to be, you would expect to see that reflected in the loan fee.
Right. Okay.
So if you're signing players for, let's say £500 million between them, and you're loaning them back to the Premier League for nothing, then the klaxon starts going. The only way you could get those players at very low prices would be if there'd been a spectacular loss of form. Yeah, we've seen this, ironically, with Chelsea and Romelu Lukaku. They signed the player for 97.5 million after one season. He's being hawked around Europe for relatively low loan fees. Saudi Arabia, offering to pay 100% of their wages. What would happen was simply that the Premier League owners and chief executives at their next meeting, they would effectively outlaw this transaction or the equivalent of.
Don't just take, give with the Instax Mini 12. An analog camera with a bubbly design which comes in a range of vibrant colors. It's got a selfie mirror, close-up mode, and automatic flash control. But the coolest thing about the Instax Mini 12? As soon as you take your pic, you can give someone an instant print. Fill your world with joy with the Instax Mini 12. Find out more at instaxus.com.
CeraVe Facial Moisturizers with SPF protect skin against damaging UV rays and continuously deliver 3 essential ceramides to help restore skin's protective barrier so it can lock in moisture. Non-greasy, fragrance-free, and won't clog pores? With CeraVe, skin feels hydrated and looks healthy all day. CeraVe Facial Moisturizers with SPF from the #1 dermatologist recommended facial moisturizer brand.
Our penultimate question, Kieran, is on a similar theme. And one of the very many reasons I love doing this podcast is that while we had a question from Deputy Chief Inspector John Davis.
He probably is a chief inspector by now, given the length of time it takes to answer the questions, the length of the queue.
Fair point. Okay, so we go from a question on Newcastle and FFP from a chief inspector to one from a lorry driver in New Zealand, Kieran, which I think is a wonderful illustration of our global appeal. Although, using your logic, we're only taking his word for it that he's a lorry driver in New Zealand, Kieran. He could be anything. But the name of this lorry driver is Adam Duda. Adam, it's lovely to mention your name.
Duda and Day.
I refer you to my comments of a few weeks ago when I wanted to call my son Zippity Doodah. I'm sorry, Adam, he must have had that his whole life. Adam Doodah says, I listen to you guys whilst driving my freight trains across the Bay of Plenty in New Zealand. How glamorous does that sound, Gary? You can almost hear the hooting of his truck, can't you, as he drives across the lonely plains of I don't know what the Bay of Plenty looks like. New Zealand looks like the most beautiful country in the world, but there you are. But Adam says, one of the many obscure things that popped into my head was the idea of getting around the Premier League's new stringent rules regarding how much a money club could get from sponsors, i.e. fair market value. As a Newcastle fan, I was thinking if it would be within a loophole of the rules that a wealthy relative or a PIF member volunteered to pay £100 million for a season ticket or a box, or offered people £10 million for a bag of chips while sitting in this seat. And as you say, Kieran, our listeners will see a rule and try and find a way around it. I think we've discussed the Roman Abramovich paying a lot of money for a season ticket or a box before, but the idea of £10 million for a bag of chips is a new one from Adam. Adam clearly has a lot of time on his hands while he's driving his freight train.
Once again, Adam, I would refer you to any transaction between the club and a related / associated party. So that's somebody that probably owns at least 10% or more of the club. Any transaction involving those people, which is at £1 million or more, then would have to be submitted to a fair market value council committee. We then get to, I think, a broader issue. Yeah, if it was a wealthy relative of a PIF member. So, if we sort of do 7 stages of Kevin Bacon, and you are the cousin of a cousin of a cousin, and you decide to do that, or Newcastle United decide to have a half-time draw, and mysteriously they're selling £10 million £1 tickets a match, and a lot of them are being taken up, and you get a signed shirt from Nobby Solano or something as a first prize. Then it could. Yeah, I'm certainly aware of at lower levels there are many scams taking place. I think if this was the case, then once again, it would work until other clubs got wind of it and they say, okay, there's not strictly an associated party because it's the cousins, wife's, uncle's, gardener who's buying the tickets. But I think that person's might be funded from elsewhere. So I think what we are moving towards is financial fair play whack-a-mole, where ingenious fans like Chief Inspector John Davis and Adam Dudar come up with ideas. The clubs will then run it past their legal counsel and say, well, it's legal, so therefore we could try it. And then you'd probably have a meeting of the board of directors to say, as soon as it gets found out, we know that 18 other clubs, 17 other clubs are going to vote against us and we're going to tighten up the rules.
Do you know, I may have done Adam Duda a disservice, Kieran, because I was thinking that by a freight train, he meant one of those big articulated lorries you see with like 4 or 5 trailers at the back you see on Taylor. It could be an actual freight train. In which case,
I've got him down as the Casey Jones of the Northern Ireland or the Southern Ireland. I don't know. My knowledge of New Zealand, and it's on my list of places to visit. I don't know where the Bay of Plenty is. I know the Baroness loves a bit of Cloudy Bay.
I'm not going anywhere near that, Kieran, but I like the idea that Adam Duda is tooting and a-rolling across the Bay of Plenty in one of those glamorous freight trains. Thank you. I also like that. I like the idea of a bidding war for a bag of chips. Suddenly a bargain. I'll give you 10 million quid. What? Producer guy's earning his corn this week, Kieran, because he's actually putting the questions in a lucid order. Because the last one mentions New Zealand, and it comes from Chris Dell. 2 questions about New Zealand or from New Zealand as well, and producer guys put them in the correct order. Chris Dell says, you've mentioned before, quite correctly, that often hosts of World Cups typically lose money due to huge spends on building new stadia and other infrastructure. New Zealand, though, built little to nothing in preparation for last year's Women's World Cup. Would this have made hosting the World Cup profitable? And how is the money distributed between FIFA and the hosts?
Right. Thank you very much for the question, Chris. If we take a look at all of the World Cups which have taken place this century, the only one, to my knowledge, which made any financial return was Germany in 2006.
Right, okay.
For exactly the same reason as Chris is highlighting here. The stadium was already there, the infrastructure was there, the hotels were there, the transport links. So relatively little adjustment was required. But even so, the broader the economic analysis that you did, some of the quoted figures that are put out by the PR agencies, you have to deal with a lot of caution. Say, well, there's been so many 100,000 extra fans. And I went to Germany in 2006. Absolutely brilliant experience. Recommend it to anybody. 2026 tickets have just gone on sale for the FIFA World Cup. So I'm building myself up to the conversation with the Baroness. quite fancy going to Mexico rather than the US for that. So as far as the Women's World Cup is concerned, there will be sort of hosting arrangements. So the first thing that FIFA say is, of course, we're a charity. So all of the profits made from ticket sales are non-taxable. And if you don't like that, we will find somebody else to host the tournament. So FIFA will be beneficiaries. What will then be the case is that as far as the individual matches taking place are concerned, the local FA, they will get a proportion of the ticket receipts as the host country. They'll also, of course, get a significant proportion of the merchandise sales and catering income and hospitality. But FIFA take the lion's share of that. Ultimately, it's FIFA's responsibility to sell the tickets. And I think we are moving. FIFA have been using a third party for ticket sales. I think FIFA are going to try to take that in-house. One just has to hope it's been more successful than FIFA's claim that they're going to bring out a video game as a replacement for Electronic Arts FIFA, because we've seen nothing yet. And the EA game is, by all accounts, absolutely superb. So they have to do something quite spectacular to lose that income source.
Well, also, they won't sell many, will they? Because it would be a massive picture of Gianni Infantino on the front of the box. which young people walking past in the whatever the CEX or whatever it is, I'm not buying that. I'll buy the one that everyone knows is a brilliant game that's been out forever. Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution to the pod as well, that'd be very kind of you, and it'll get you access to our chat community and our regular quizzes, and you can do that by going to patreon.com/priceoffootball. And if you do it in the next week or so, we can announce Kieran Maguire. We can announce, Kieran, finally, that our end-of-season quiz is taking place on Wednesday, the 6th of June, Kieran. D-Day itself, 7:30 in the evening. So if you're a Patreon, you'll find details of that in the next couple of days of how to join us, and we look forward to it. It's always a highlight of the season, and the Christmas one is even more special. Oh, Christmas on the way, Kieran. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, you can email us at questions@priceoffootball.com, and you can go to the same website to buy a book, one of our other books, or get yourself a Price of Football t-shirt. And our latest book will be out in paperback in September, so we'll keep you up to date with the date for that as well. And don't forget, you can find the Price of Football on Twitter or X, whatever you prefer to call it, and our YouTube channel. We'll be back on Thursday, just 2 days' time, with our news pod. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, it's like departure from our customary farewell, because Kevin and I have been married for a long period, more than 500 episodes as far as the show is concerned.
It don't seem a day too long.
I just want to offer, and from producer Guy and Baroness and all of our friends at the Parsons Arm that I've got to know, a huge congratulations to Kevin and Ali. 30 years married, a true loving couple. Kevin likes to present himself as Mr. Grumpy and a big bad bear, but I know few blokes that are in love with their wife as Kevin is to Ali. And congratulations to the pair of you, and all of our love from all of the listeners.
Oh, that's very sweet of you. It's today, well, Tuesday, yeah, it's our 30th. Well, yes, thank you. I do. I love her very much. I wouldn't be here without her, to be perfectly honest. I'm going to get emotional, Kieran, so I'm going to say goodbye. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The Price of Football. The Price of Football.